Hey guys, welcome to the MC Anime Podcast. We cover anime, geek culture, Japanese aesthetics, and Asian studies. We are a multi-fandom podcast, and you can expect to hear topics in your favorite hobby or fandom activity potentially. You can find MC Anime on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Also, please check out mcanimepodcast.com, our website. Furthermore, stay tuned in for another episode.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of MC Anime. MC here, fellow co-host with us today, Leah. How you doing today, Leah?
I'm pretty awesome. I'm back from vacation, so I'm completely refreshed. So that makes me very happy. So I missed a week, but it was worth it. I promise.
Yeah, she had to celebrate the Independence for off weekend, so there you go. But yeah, you missed some good topics like the American animation discussion and the Asian studies gunpowder and fireworks. So you actually had some interesting conversations that you missed.
I wish I could say I feel bad, but I was in Puerto Rico, so I don't. I was on the beach most of the time. It was really nice. But they do sound interesting, so I'll have to check them out because I'm sure you guys really got into it.
Yeah, I did. So, especially finding out that the early versions of gunpowder and fireworks was called the fire drug in Chinese history. So that was really interesting.
The fire drug?
It was called the fire drug because it had early pyrotechnics, tectonics, and then alchemists procuring the gunpowder to do the four uses like bombs, fireworks, gun
Very dramatic, though.
and rockets/firecrackers as well.
Yeah, just when you thought exploding projectiles couldn't get any more dramatic and attention grabbing, they were called fire drugs.
Yeah.
Neat. I'm going to start referring to them as that now. I'm like, I need that fire drug. And we'll see how quickly I get kicked out of kid party or something.
And every time that someone
goodness.
else from a new Chinese neighboring country invaded China, they took the secrets and kept building onto it. So it wasn't until
the
after
war on drugs never quits.
Well, also they tried to isolate it from sulfur and saltpeter from being imported from the country, so that other people didn't have access to it. So that was a really interesting conversation. Oh gosh, but today is another essential topic that would be interesting. POV for filming. So, POV stands for point of view, and it's often characterized by first person, second person, third person limited, and third person omniscient. So, when you hear POV or point of view, what do you think of?
What do I think of when I hear point of view?
Yeah.
I think of literally that. I think of point of view. I don't have a specific one that I like lean more towards.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe third person.
Oh, okay.
When it comes to video games.
Yeah.
Like the scroll along video games, I do like it when they have a narrator or whatnot to add a bit of flair to the story.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, typically when I hear POV, I'm just wondering how it's going to tell the story.
True.
And I like when they switch it up.
Yeah. So what's your POV for this subject?
What is my POV?
What's your point of view for this particular subject?
I don't think I have one. I'm going to be honest. I think my POV it's going to be probably first person.
Gotcha.
Because it's going to be me talking about it.
True.
Yeah. But granted, I like filmmaking, so it'll be a positive POV.
True. Individually, we have the first person with us, but we also have the second person point of view for the entire video, so for the podcast. So that's always something to consider when you're considering point of view and how you're portraying point of view in different productions wise.
That is something I could consider, but I don't. But this is why we have you here. It is something I could think about, but I don't ever. It's like, I hope that came out well.
It did. I know it did, because you're like, I didn't expect that, but it actually sounds somewhat consistent.
So, what is your POV?
What, my point of view?
Yeah, what's your point of view?
Well, my point of view on this is having the aesthetics of filming, the video editing, making, and production of it, and also seeing how the story is told and analyzing, that's this point of view, and this is how I'm going to analyze it.
I mean, that's a pretty straightforward POV.
Yeah.
That kind of plays into, your roles and what you're doing. It's also storytelling.
Yeah,
so,
true.
Beautiful.
So, let's talk with first person. So, first person is really interesting. That's the personal point of view from the main character. So, it's the I and me, but not the you. The you is second person, so. Well, technically it'd be your point of view, that'd be first person, but from my perspective, it'd be second person, so.
Yes, but typically in storytelling, if it is first person, it's probably coming from, you're either reading a book, so it's the character, the main protagonist, or whoever's the main character at that time. Yeah. Or if it's some type of visual medium, you're looking at it through the eyes of the character or how events are affecting said character.
Yeah. And also with first person, you have to keep a note that it's kind of interesting because, it always reminds me of that story. It's like, I'm always doing this. I do this. This is how my typical day is. And then this is how my typical day falls apart. You ever have that character that just gives an entire monologue about their entire day going wrong? And they say, I.
Well, yeah, I don't mind characters who give exposition because you can kind of do it in first or third person. Usually it works best. And I only like it if it's giving backstory to something that we don't really need to see because it's not that important.
Yeah.
Or just giving context so we can get to the next big thing. But when it's something like they're building up to a fight or they're building up to and then my friend died during this massive battle, and it's like, but they don't show you the battle, they just say it. I dislike that.
Yeah.
If it's important, I like it when they show it rather than talk about it.
True. Basically, you want to have the flashback scene telling the story of what happened to the second person of view. Because typically flashbacks are either first person or second person, so.
Yeah, typically that's how it goes. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of gratuitous flashbacks. At that point, I feel like if your story requires you to tell me so many flashbacks, it's not the storytelling where it's like it it has different points in the stories that it transitions to, and you don't realize until the end how they all actually go in sequence.
Yeah.
And that can make it fun. But when they just do massive flashbacks, it's like, give it a break. You should have just started in the past. So we could have got past all of this. Because if you flashback like the shows like in anime where when it comes back from what I guess would be a commercial break, and then they do a flashback of a thing that just happened. Oh, I hate that.
Are you talking about the recap?
It's not even a recap. No, it's the same episode. Like something will happen.
Oh yeah.
And then like I've seen it in like King's Game that I'm watching, and it'll be like a scene just happened. They'll move to another location, and as they're walking there, the main character is thinking back about what just happened. But then they just replay the same scene as he talks over it. I hate that. I hate it so much. I'm like, we were just there. We were just there.
Gosh, yes. And I think a really good thing that first person creates in the scheme of things is the personal narrative of the character. I think the personal narrative of them telling the story or them observing through their eyes tells a lot. I don't really think there is much. It's like a safe bet kind of thing. So them telling the story and then observing it and through their observation is kind of key in some aspects. But typically movies don't usually have just one type. It switches between each POV.
Yeah. No, that's accurate. I don't mind when it switches from POV. I would still call it probably first person. I wouldn't switch to like second person or third when they switch character perspective. Unless we're supposed to be seeing these other characters do something, but we're still in the like mind space of whoever our protagonist is.
Yeah.
But some stories have multiple protagonists, and I'm fine with that. I think that can blend really well.
Oh, yeah. You know, this kind of brings on second person real quick, too. Second person is he or she telling the story from their lens, but you know that they're telling the story. A lot of times that's how it usually filters off. So someone telling you the story, but it's from their perspective, so you have to listen to their perspective first.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you saying like the main character who we're listening to this story from another character?
Yeah, that's an example of second person.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's all I've been doing. Like I think the best way to see that is probably through, I would say, video games. I found because that's also how they just kind of give exposition. They just have some random character that you encounter, and they give you backstory, but from their point of view, and you weren't there, and then it relates somehow to your story or gives you some knowledge that you're going to need later on.
Yeah. So it's usually involving you. It lets you into your own thoughts and your background, and you as the character. So, you know, let's say this: you walked across the bridge. You used to say the second person say you, as the reader or the listener would have done. So, and I think a really good use of second person point of view is a public service announcement. That is a very strong medium to tell a second person narrative point of view. What do you think?
I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, that's about right.
Because it really resonates.
It's typically going to be something that nobody else knows about either.
Yeah.
Or it reconfirms something that a character is trying to like inform their friends about, but they don't believe them.
Oh yeah. Especially in a story. Let's say you have the main character, they always do first person. But you have this one character that's talking about you. You as a person need to fight this war in order to save our country. You are a savior and a protector. You need to do this. You need to strive for the better for the people that's surrounding you. What kind of message does that give to you as the reader or the listener to what the film or the story is about?
I mean, it's clearly there to invoke emotion.
Yeah.
And I think also to progress the story.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, realistically, in storytelling, it's hard to believe that the protagonist is going to constantly come across people who just have all this wealth of knowledge. But having like a PSA go off when there is a catastrophe happening, or also newscasting, like broadcasting on the news, where they do it rather than just being an intercom.
Mm-hmm.
And these can help kind of push the story along. So it's not centered just on our main character or a main group of people, but it's something that's supposed to be for the whole world in the story building.
Yeah.
I like those.
Oh yeah.
I think those are fun. I think sometimes though, it can probably be done better. Sometimes it can be either overly specific. I don't know if you've ever seen those where they're like, I'm like, how did they have all these details?
Yeah.
Like they weren't even there. Or it can be very vague, and that can impact how well the characters react to things. But I do hate it when it's like maybe it's a zombie outbreak, and the PSA or the newscasting is like, "Hey, zombies," and someone's still like, "I don't believe it."
Exactly.
There's no way. I'm just like, okay, Susan, you can die. Like, everyone's telling you what's going on.
Oh yeah. And it's like I think the second person narrative, it's intimate. It has a conversation. It immediately makes you as if you know the person speaking. It's also inclusive. Feelings of trust. Ideal, for persuasive piece or telling you something that is directing the story in a specific nature. You're thrown into the action and become part of the events yourself. Yeah.
They objective.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. If you're a friend or confident or even complicit in misdeeds, you can portray them as different roles with second person as well. You can make them accountable. You can try to give attention to the main character, trying to tell them, you need to fix this, you need to stop doing this. It can also be a distraction too.
Very true. Very true. Sometimes I do find the second POV can be just a little underwhelming if I don't have any connection to the character who's come in. Yeah. If it is just someone who's supposed to give exposition and then they die, that's really common. Yeah. They'll pop in, they'll tell the main people what's going on, and then I don't know, they'll get obliterated or just dash, and they're gone. Okay.
Yeah. And for a recap of what you were saying, it can feel unrealistic. If you don't have a clear idea of the reader, it can be useful if you're trying to predict a specific type of the reader, but you can also seem accusatory and suggest you're looking down on the reader. So, yes, you enjoy being immersed in the story, but it's also hard to suspend the disbelief to be completely part of the action. So if you constantly use second person, the problem that you often get is that the readers or the listeners lose touch with the story. It's very significant it's more significant to gain your attention back to the story and use important events, but typically a lot of times second person is very quick in POV storytelling. It's like 2 minutes and it's back to the first or the third person point of view. So I also feel like that second person point of view often gets overlooked because not a lot of people only use it as like a transitioning point of view to back to the main point of view, and it kind of people overlook it because it's less important than what the main point of views are. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think that people have a dislike for second POV or like a lesser preference for it. I just think it's the least common to really use. Like if you do third person where you have like a narrative, that can help add like an objective view or subjective, and then you can just hit like the full view picture, which is like the wide lens angle. And if you do first person POV, that is, more narrowed in, bigger focus, detail. Yeah. But I think for second person, if it's not done correctly, or sometimes it can end up being, when there's side characters that you end up liking more than the main character. That's what I also think about in regards to like second POV, where you'll have someone come in, but you just don't get enough of them. So you'll end up either wanting more of that person or kind of wondering, oh, that person was maybe just there for a plot point. Yeah. And the writer didn't know what to do with them afterwards. So they just killed them off or got rid of them, sent them off somewhere. So I think that's all.
Oh, yeah. And don't get me wrong. The strengths of second points of view is the change of pace. So, second person of view is really heavily used into like transitioning, but also important story elements that need to be told in a particular point of view that allows the listeners to follow along better. I think that's what I'm trying to say. They can follow along better at that specific moment and follow and try to be part of the action. But I feel like the strongest moment for second person is including the reader or the listener in that specific moment.
I can agree. Again, I think it's how it's executed.
Yeah.
I think what makes it breaks it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can still agree with that point.
Oh. So that's second person.
Yeah.
What second person involves and details and kind of plays an important, essential part of the plot in most things, how it's used. I like you as the commander in nature as well. Come on out to your neighborhood food line and shop with us. We'll have everything you need plus more. That's a way to use second person, but is you using we instead of you. So.
Yeah, I guess you could do it as like an advertisement.
Yeah.
Esque way.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah.
Like commercialized wise. But yeah, that's I guess that is pretty true. But I also think that when I look at like second person POV, I always kind of count them as like the puzzle piece, like that missing puzzle piece, in order to like help the main group along. Or they are like kind of like the center focus for whatever portion of the story it is.
Yep. It brings on extra storytelling in a way that's not just using the same plot devices. There's so many uses to second person that you can use. It's very versatile in that medium.
Oh, absolutely. But I do think that there is a steady middle ground.
Yeah.
Like, one of my favorite things is watching, I love movies. I like watching them being like, why did you make this decision? And going from there. But in a lot of fan movies, the number one thing that you always get is with that second POV when they're like introducing these kind of like on the edge characters who are in there for a moment. They'll give them like lines of exposition or like in lines of exposition about themselves or about a situation that never come up again. So while sometimes you get characters in puzzle piece, you'll also get characters who are like a puzzle piece, but to like a different fault. Like they don't add anything to the story. You learn something about them, and you're just like, okay, cool, maybe that'll come up later. And it's like, no, it doesn't. No, not one, not a lick.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, you know, my grandmother loved cherry pie. And then that never comes up ever again. We'll see 3 old ladies. None of them are their grandparents. None of them like pies. And they're like, all right, anyway.
Yes.
And credit.
Second person has that, like, very small moments. Like, it's, like, used that specific time. And then it's not important enough to bring back. So, sure, they did a good second point of view with it, but if it doesn't really get retold or flashback wise, then it's
there's no point.
Yeah.
There's no point.
It's unessential.
Second POV. That's what I'm saying. I don't think it's so much that people are like, oh man, I hate when they introduce other characters. I think it's literally like, man, I really hate when they introduce characters of like no substance.
Exactly.
Like, you know, you're like, oh my god, we really got to get this. It's literally as if all the ninjas who fight like Madara in one scene in Naruto, like the ones who just get wiped out, you're just like, yeah, imagine all of those people giving you some pointless thing about their life as a backstory, some worthless fact, and then they just get wiped out, and it means nothing to the story. That would drive you crazy.
Yeah.
And that
I'm the Nara clan. Here I am
to
to take my visions, and then I'm gone. Soup.
Yeah. Like, I think one of the funniest ones that I've seen is in like part, I want to say like 2 or 3. I think it's part 3 of like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, where they have like the 3 gods from Egypt or whatever. In the beginning of that, they go into like a pyramid tomb place in the desert. These guys come out, and there is a dude who like drove the car or whatever. So they call him Frank. And you learn that he has like a fiance waiting for him. He's getting married soon. He has dreams of like opening a bakery or something stupid. And then they cut him in half. Like, you learn that, and then they make it seem like it's a reason why the heroes have to stop these gods who are planning on destroying the world. They're like, oh, for Frank, who we've only known for 5 minutes. And I'm like, no! Why did we learn so much about this man in 5 minutes? And he's dead. And they never bring him up ever again in the story. When the story is over and they win, never bring him up.
Oh,
we never see his fiance outside of the locket. It makes me angry. It makes me so mad.
Well, that reminds me of those Shonen type characters. Just some random character, and then they do a misdeed, and it upsets the main character, and that's the main reason why the main character fights this particular person and picks a fight with them, because they're trying to defend the honor of this random person that doesn't get introduced again.
No, and I think the best ones are when they don't even give that character they're gonna fight a face.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like you just see brown hair, and then their mouth, and then their face is like a grayish W face, and you're just like, where are their eyes? And they're like, yeah, we didn't even bother.
Oh gosh.
Just know they're here for storytelling and thickening up our character. That is it.
Exactly.
I dislike it so much.
So that's limitations of second person. Now we have third person point of view limited. So if you thought second person was limited, well, third person limited might just be that exception. So basically, first person narration can provide intimacy. It's also limited by perspective abilities of the character. Third person narration is a more flexible choice for a writer. It allows them to switch between characters' points of views. So, for example, instead of I woke up this morning, he woke up that morning after the crash in the bedroom. That can provide very specific moments. He woke up and this is what happened. So you can actually, it basically is a very quick transition from first person to third person really easily when you do he, she, we, us pronouns, but you don't know, you're not like as super attached to the character in this way.
I don't know. I mean, I really don't mind when we have a narrator who seemingly doesn't know much about what's going on in the story.
Yeah.
I don't mind those ones so much. I think that they help like kind of encompass what's going on. And those can be really good if the story that you're watching has a lot going on visually.
Yeah.
And you're trying to keep up, and it's like, yeah, great, so that happened, and you're like, oh, okay, all right, we're on the same page.
Yeah.
But typically, most time you'll see them know, they'll drop hints that they know more than what they're sharing.
Yeah. You know, for example, day has dawned cold and gray when the man turned outside from the main Yukon Trail. He climbed to the high earth bank, where a little travel trail led east for the pine forest. So when you have that type of storytelling involved, it creates a notion to what's happening, but you also have a really interesting setup to the narration that can just smooth out the plot points.
Yes, I would say yes and no. Because, like, I think they can help smooth out the plot points. Sometimes I think of it as like when you have a narrator who like comes in and just kind of recaps what's happened, which you get a lot in anime.
Yeah.
Like Dragon Ball Z is great for that. Like last time on Dragon Ball Z, and you'll be like, oh, okay, these things happen, and then they'll be like, what will happen next to our heroes? They don't give anything else, and I do think that the main bumps that they'll usually help with is like literally just recaps and making sure you know where you are in the story.
And third person is more effective in writing than filming, but it does have a use in filming because it's a very good transition point between first, second, third, and all the other examples. I mean, if you have a play type version like documentary, narration is great in that medium specifically because it's telling you everything is happening. As he takes on arms on the battlefield, he is struck down by a pike, and that pike has slammed to his shoulders, and now you don't see him ever again. That could provide a strong sense of what's going on, what is happening, and specific details telling you that you might not see in the B-roll footage. Sometimes narration, they have B-roll footage, but they also just have them listing out what's going on.
I mean, yeah, I'm trying to think back to like to some shows that I've seen that have done that, and I will say that is one common thing that kind of a narrator will do when they're kind of more secluded in regards to the story. They'll do quick wrap up, and those are the ones where I said earlier where it's like when you go from POV and then it'll just be like, and they were never seen or heard from again. And I'm just like, what do you mean? What do you mean? They fell off that cliff and they just were never seen or heard from again. I think I can digest it more when it comes from a narrator point of view. Yeah. As if it's like they're literally reading the story to you. Yeah. Or if they're like the god of that universe, rather than when it is the characters themselves. And I'm like, well, maybe they weren't seen again, like, to you. Like, maybe someone else saw them, but, that is just me being nitpicky.
Yeah. And usually third-person limited point of view, you also have, you have to choose a narrator. When you choose a character, you serve as the main point for any chapter or scene. Hold it to the person who has the most to lose or to learn. Whichever character is facing the highest stakes, the one who has the most to lose, or also who will be the one to follow closely, thoughts and reactions will carry the most tension for the reader. Watchers tend to identify which characters who are learning, like who they are, and these characters can provide valuable information to the reader. So, when you really think about it, who is going to be your narrator? That is a very key point for third-person limited. Who's going to tell the story, and what do they have to lose, what do they have to gain, or what do they learn by being the narrator? Because the narrator can change. It doesn't have to be the same type person all the time.
No.
And specifically, a narrator does really well with flashbacks as well. Like, a flashback with a narrator is a lot better than trying to do a weird person of view or second person of view of a flashback. Because they're a neutral party. When you have third person limited, they will remove from the character, and they're just telling what's going on with they don't have much attachment to the character. So they're a third party removed when they tell the story.
Oh yeah. I mean, they don't do the bias thing.
Yeah.
In regards to what's going on with the character. A lot of time it literally is just them being, this is where we're at, this is what's going on. Yeah. And then it might be to push you towards a certain emotion. Like, say if the characters are left on a cliffhanger point, then they'll be like, okay, this is precarious, this is dangerous. What's going to happen to our characters? Find out next week or something like that. Or we'll have to come back to it. Or they'll leave certain characters in a precarious situation and switch us back over to someone who's maybe searching for something. Or they're just walking and talking, maybe having a deep conversation, but they're not the ones who are in danger. And so you're just sitting there and you're like, are we going to go back to that? Yeah. And the narrator, calm as can be. You're not screaming, nothing.
Yeah. So as we tell the story of our young heroes, they wake up in the morning and they just get up and do sparring for all day for 3 hours straight. And afterwards they hunt a boar and get the fire going, and they have a good feast in the late afternoon. When you switch, one thing you want to do is, once you have a narrator, switch perspectives. So let's say the view of an unimportant character. I'm so glad to be here. I have company around me. And they're waking up in the morning, and here I am. generous of their happiness. And if you switch it to, like, I don't know, security guard, what are they doing? Why are they here? They need to behave themselves, because if not, it's going to cause issues. You need that transitioning point of perspectives, because different perspectives actually tell the story better.
I don't know. I do think that different perspectives can help move the story along, and it also makes it interesting. So you're not kind of left with the same flow. It does change up the tempo and the emotions base, but I wouldn't say that having a narrator introduce a character of like little importance or multiple characters of little importance makes the story more interesting. If anything, again, it's just that weird, like, why is there exposition for this if they don't play an actual role?
Oh, yeah.
And again, sometimes it's better to show it rather than say it. The only difference, of course, would be if you are reading a written play and you're getting backstory on what this character is, or, you know, what they're about to do and who they are. Or if it is like a book, a poem, a short story, whatever. That's the only time I will say, like, okay, it makes sense that you introduce the mailman who we'll never see or hear from again, or tell us what their emotional state is when we might actually just be seeing it.
Yeah, and a lot of times, anime specifically, when they introduce the character, they do the name, the powers, where they're from, what they do. They give like that aspect, but it's not really narration or third person. It's just infographic. So instead of taking time to explain who they are, they just do a pop-up and say, this is who they are. I was like, well, I guess that's working, but it's like so quick that it's like, well, I don't know what that is.
I will say I think a good blend of that.
Yeah.
Done better in the second version of it. Yeah. But Suicide Squad was good with that, where they kind of gave you like a character card, a character sheet.
Yeah, they
told
do
you
that.
Where they were from, their abilities, all of that. So you didn't have to go through their full backstory.
Yeah.
But they still showed you some stuff of like what they do and why they're in prison. But they did it so quickly in the opening sequence that you were like, there is 17 lines of text. Why are you showing this in 3 seconds? That was the only downside. So unless you know that character, you're not going to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they also had Olivia Waller or Walter. Whoever Viola Davis plays in the movie. She's the one who's like the warden, and she gives a backstory on what these characters do as you see the card in their story.
And another thing,
so she played as a narrator. Yeah.
Another thing with third person, stick to your point of view. It's very essential, because you don't want to change in the middle and then basically lose any narration you want to do. And then, an unreliable narrator. When you limit the information on the screen, you can to a single point of view, that character might happen to be hiding something from you, or simply doesn't know an important piece of information. So you can withhold startling information from the reader and generate enthralling plot twists. So
this is I'll probably say the closest I can think of off the top of my head, probably Deadpool.
Yeah.
Would be probably a good unreliable narrator, because he's telling you through the story and whatnot, but you're also like, you have 2 other voices in your head, which is fun. But also, that does mean that if memory serves correct, which it probably doesn't, because he's been, had so much head trauma, we're probably missing something. And this is where other characters come in for that second POV to help clarify some things. Yeah. So, as long as your unreliable narrator gets kind of like their just desserts at some point in the story or corrected, it can lend to whoever's enjoying your medium being like, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Limited might not be the biased narrator. Now, when we get to the third person omniscient, this is where the narrator is very attached to the character. So this is where bias can come in as well. The third-person omniscient point of view, the omniscient narrator knows everything about the movie and its characters. This narrator can enter anyone's mind, move freely from time, and give the reader their own opinions and observations as well. Now, it's rare that a narrator is fully omniscient because it's usually just too much for readers to have every character's thoughts in their head at once. So, there is that.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, also sometimes when it comes to the omnipotent narrator, it's not even so much that they're telling you the POV or like the feelings and emotions of the character correctly. Like, they'll tell you, they'll be like, yeah, and it was, everybody was really upset with what they done. Like, they can also bend your feelings and reaction to things, even though you just watched it happen.
Well, it's actually omniscient.
Because, again, you trust you trust the narrator.
Yeah.
You're like, well, the narrator must know. Why else would they be saying that?
Yeah. It's also not omnipotent, but omniscient is what it's omniscient.
I'm sorry, omniscient.
Omnipotent, it's like, I think, all-powerful. Omniscient is
that's all-powerful.
Oh, you gotta love omni pronouns. Oh, gosh. They sound too similar. But
yeah,
having the narrator know mostly everything about the characters kind of provides a... I don't know, it's a good storytelling mechanism. Because if the narrator knows what's going to happen, they're not like as shocked as it happens, and they provide context to what they think is going on, and they might say, "Oh, here comes the baffling idiot that always gets into trouble, who never learns from their mistakes, and here they are, once again, creating the same mistake over and over. When do they ever learn?" Stuff like that kind of adds to the irony of the character.
Oh, for sure. I think my favorite one right now, overall would probably be, have you ever played the Stanley Parable?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In that one, you are a guy named Stanley who works in an office. That's one of those jobs where you just press buttons on a screen. Nothing special or unique ever happens to them. Except one day he's in the office, doesn't get any commands, and realizes he's locked in there alone. And you have this narrator who basically is supposed to be guiding you around, but he's also very opinionated, and depending on what actions you do, he has he'll go down a line of dialogue where sometimes he's just insulting you. Yeah. Or he'll be like, wow, maybe you died, and that's why you're not doing this thing I told you to do. Yeah. Is there anybody else around? And so it gets really, really funny when you have a good narrator who essentially is their own personality. Yeah. And they don't usually care about what's going to happen to the characters. They just want to see the story play out.
Oh, yeah. And also, I think a good all-knowing narrator in third-person omniscient is that villain who has like these weird book powers and creates a story with the main protagonist, and they have to overcome the story while the villain's actually narrating the story. You ever seen that trope?
I have indeed. I think that's in like, what is it, like Little Misfortune?
Yeah.
Where the narrator, you're like, oh, okay, I'll listen to them. I think they're trying to lead me the right way. But the more that they do, you're like, this feels like you're evil and you're trying to get me killed.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, that's why. Villain.
It's kind of interesting kind of thing. I mean,
It was a good way to switch it up.
True. Or that tale where the hero take on the zombies that I just magically created and overcome to save the day. They always are changing what they're going to say, too. So, like, the character has to be, like, really intensive about, like, oh, if this is part of the story, then I can use this story element to defeat you.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think the all-knowing narrator is really interesting because they're more relatable. Like, I know the unbiased narrator is always an essential part for a story for narration, but, like, sometimes the best narrator for comedic effect is the one that knows everything. And usually, when you have to pick out, which character do you think is the narrator observing everything? Because a lot of times, the narrator in the movie is actually a particular character, and you can find evidence to claim it's this person telling this because this is what they experience. Or sometimes you have the background of who the narrator is, and they're already telling the story throughout the process.
Yeah, because I normally don't see ones where the narrator is an active character within the main group. Typically, they're off somewhere in the distance, or you just never see them. They're kind of like a voice in the sky.
Or you actually see them. Sometimes you actually see them telling the story, like the snowman from Rudolph.
That's very true as well. I do like the storyteller being kind of like almost like a cutscene.
Yeah.
Like you come back to them and they're in a secluded place. The characters are never there, and they really don't interact with anyone in the stories, but they are keeping you along what's happening, and they also have their own emotions added to it.
Oh yeah. You know, we have the perspective to create a more godlike or deliberately authorial persona to comment on the action with the benefit of distance. You sweeping, the description, setting the plot, establish the mood, or the atmosphere of a scene. Now, physiological digressions also serve to develop, relate to this action of the story as well. Now, omniscient storytelling and point of view is the oldest and widely used storytelling devices. A lot of plays would actually use this to basically tell up the play. It kind of like, it's really easy
when you
to
have
write
the
the story.
narrator as a character, is an added element.
Yeah.
So granted, I don't remember many people wanting to be the narrator unless they wanted to be able to act in a play, but not have to act. Like, they have a lot of lines, but they don't actually have to, like, emote anything besides, like, a very, like, boisterous voice.
True.
That was an easy way to get through theater if you had to.
Oh, yeah.
Fun fact.
If there was ever a narrator position, I would always volunteer for it, because I love reading. I actually like the narrator is one of the most lines that have the most saying in what they're saying in the story. I'm sorry, but like, if you like to talk a lot, narrator is right up your alley. Like, the main character.
The man with a podcast.
What?
I says the man with a podcast. Yes, I believe 100% that you would be like, oh, I get to talk a lot. So, and you don't even really have to audition for it, because no one really asked to be the narrator if they're going to do an act.
Yeah. No one actually, like, no one's going to argue with you because they don't like being the narrator.
Yeah, they're going to be like, yeah, sure, whatever, dude. Here's a microphone.
Yeah, because a lot of people like a specific character, so they want to be that specific character instead of the narrator.
Absolutely.
Like, oh, I'll be the princess. I'll be the prince. Oh, who wants to be the narrator? I'll be the narrator. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, when was the last time you saw someone get an Oscar for just talking? Unless they're doing voice acting, that doesn't even count either in theater. There's no Tonys to the narrator.
Actually, there's a lot of awards for best narrator and voices, like documentaries. I think Denzel Washington's a really good narrator. There's other ones too. Actually, narrators get paid a lot.
I didn't say they didn't. I just said that at the Tonys, I'm not gonna see a narrator go up on stage for like the Tonys are for plays. That's their Oscars.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing narrators like for West Side Story going up there. And they're like, yeah, that guy who sings, dance, and like did a backflip in a death scene, he wasn't the best one here. That guy who read the transitions, give him all the awards. That's what I mean. But no, narrators do get paid a lot.
Yeah.
Voice actors are very much so needed. So
yeah. If it's, I think the two most common point of views that we have is first person and third person limited, and then omniscient is third, and then second person is like last, or it can be tied with omniscient, because they're very niche relating or very small impact when they use it as a transition.
I'll have to agree with that. I think the biggest thing when it comes to having third person is just how do they fit with the story?
Yeah.
Because if you're trying to push an emotion, even if they are a narrator who has their own personal opinions thrown in there, sometimes it doesn't fit where you include them. So that's also a big hurdle that people have to understand. Not only do you have to understand how first and second person work, but you have to understand when you should do third person and when it's best to let the characters themselves talk and speak and explain their own feelings. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's usually with narration and third person being applied, there's like an element of narrating the scene and then the characters acting out their own scenes without the narrator. And there is times when you can overly use the narrator and lose impact, but typically those, when you overuse the narrator, is more omniscient, the all-knowing narrator. That's usually when the narrator is more used.
I don't know. Sometimes it's not even that. I don't know if you've ever seen, like, I mean, I think this comes in, like, more amateur or, like, first written books. In pieces of, like, written literature that need a bit more work, but you'll have it where, like, you're reading, and it'll be like, but I don't want to go to the park, said Sally. It'll be like, and every time there's a line, it'll say, he said, she said, and there's no difference, there's no fluctuation to it. Oh, I hate that. To me, that's also, like, almost narrator-esque, where it's just like, I don't like that you're constantly saying their name. Their name shows up 55 times on this page every time they talk. I don't like that.
Well, that's narrator-esque to a point, but what mostly you're describing is second-person storytelling. So when you don't switch from second person, he said, she said, they said this, stuff like that is second person. Unless it's like the narrator, oh yeah, he said this with great attitude and melancholy in his voice when he went down for the last time when he tripped over the hill.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about from a narrator point. I'm not talking about when they just have the two characters, and the thing is basically POV for those characters. I mean, when it's like, I think a good example would probably be like The Wizard of Oz, where most things are being told from a kind of third-person point of view outside of when Dorothy is talking or when a specific character is talking.
Oh,
but a lot of it, because they have to explain this magical land, it's going to be narrator point of view. But that one's way better done. In the book, it's actually better than the movie, in my opinion.
And actually, a lot of times, third person is heavily done in books. It's a great medium for third person, and third person tells a story.
Mm-hmm.
And usually first and second person is used when they want direct character dialogue or the experiences of the character changing the point of view. But with movies, third person is not usually used. Well, alright. The transition to third person in movies is usually you don't need a narrator to tell what's going on. All you really have to do is show what's going on. So instead of the line, he punched this alien in the face with great force, you can just show him punching the alien and sending it back with great force. See what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So when they do POV for movies, third person is usually as a special role when it happens. So when you initially put third person in a movie, there's a special reason why. Because it's very easy to go between second person and third person. I wonder, okay, a group shot. Would that be third person because everyone's doing everything and they're just doing a battle scene? Wouldn't that just be an example of third person? Instead of someone telling what's going on, you see what's going on, but there's not like much first person or second person because it's the title group shot?
The only time I would say that would probably be if they're not actually showing the specific characters that you know fighting. Like if like you say you came on to a battle scene and it was mainly like an overview of that fight.
Yeah.
Then I would say maybe that's kind of like third person-esque. Yeah. But in a lot of fight scenes that I've seen is like they'll switch the point of view between different characters.
Yeah.
That way you see the full scope of the fight, and then they'll have like a wide shot fight, a wide shot of the battle. But normally you're gonna be in the position of whatever character it is.
It's fighting.
Yeah. Like they do that really well in like The Witcher, where they'll switch up if there's multiple like awesome characters fighting. They'll switch up whose perspective it's from. Yeah. And I mean, normally it's Geralt's, but you'll switch up and you'll be like, oh snap, they're going through that, and no, they're going through that. That person is now dead. Okay, no more POV for them. And you'll keep hopping around, but very rarely, unless they're trying to describe the battle.
Yeah.
And I think that's more documentary style, where they'll say like, you know, what the time frame is, like what year, what's been happening before then, and what's happening in the battle is when you'll get that third person.
Yeah. In 1432, a great battle emerged as the army advanced from the mountains and attacked the trolls, and the trolls were defeated, one by one, but the humans had the might to do it all the way against the one-on-one fight with the trolls.
Yeah, so that's the best way for them to jump into first person or second person, because it's really weird to jump into a battle documentary style and they don't tell you who it is. And very rarely are the people fighting with them going to be like, my great Lord Emperor, and give their full name. No one's going to do that. They're not going to be like, who's ruled for the last 15 years with an iron fist. They're not. Yeah. They're just going to say my Lord or my Emperor, and it's not helpful.
I mean, they do have some battles like that. Me, Xavier the Third, will take down this enemy. Rah! I mean, usually battles like that have like a comedic effect when they're just telling their name and then...
Yeah, I was going to say, that reminds me of like drunk history where like they're explaining who the person is, and then because they're drunk, when they're doing the reenactment, they say their name again and exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
Those are the only times where I'm like, this makes sense. This reads.
But yeah, that is this particular episode for POV for Filming. Do you have any concluding statements about POV for Filming and what we discussed about first person, second person, and third person limited and third person omniscient?
The only thing I really can say is check out all these different mediums and how you see storytelling.
Yeah.
And then try to identify on your own, especially if you're someone who, how we had our world building in languages episode. If you really want to know how to tell your story in a very clear way, watch or read and check out different forms of media, and you'll see how that story is told, and it might help you with crafting your own. Again, you might try and throw in a narrator when it's better to just have the characters go through the actions themselves. Or if you need some exposition and you don't want to write a bunch of wordy dialogue, you can do second or third POV to really like help push the story along quickly.
Oh yeah.
And you'll save yourself some time.
Yeah. With that, first person is exposition, them telling their own story. Second person is just basically you observing them. He or she did this. This is what they're doing. This is how they did it. Third person limited is just basically he or she is going about his day without any business. And then suddenly this happens. And they fall down.
Yes.
But they did not know they're going to fall down. They just, they fall down. And then third person omniscient is, the person fell down. They got what they were. The person fell down. They got what they were coming to them, because karma is just a bad person in general. Do not mess with them and do not do any bad action before and resulting in a fall. So there you go. So
there you go.
With that, this concludes POV for Filming, and special thanks to Leah being my second person point of audience in this case.
Oh, Jesus. You're very welcome. I don't think I had a choice if I was on the episode, but you are very welcome. I do what I can for the people.
Exactly. Please don't forget to subscribe to us on the MC Anime Podcast website, at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Please be part of the Patreon community with the MC Animators, anime polls, proposing series for us to discuss, being a special guest, having custom cover art. All of that is included. Please follow us on Patreon, and if not, follow us on social media and mcanimepodcast.com for more content for MC Anime Podcast, and MC and Leah being your two hosts for content near us. Bye, guys.
This concludes another episode of MC Anime Podcast. MC Anime Podcast is available on podcast directories like Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. We also have our website at mcanimepodcast.com. If you want to directly support us, then follow Patreon blog MC Anime. Finally, if you want services for hire, then we're available on Fiverr for audio and video production, graphic design, idea consulting, and blog and article writing.